Hi everyone, welcome back to Highly Inspired. I'm Ella.
And I'm Jordan.
Hey guys, welcome back. We're back in Phoenix. We're going to be here for probably a while now.
Yep, it's our home. So we are done kind of globetrotting for a little bit. We were in different places this summer, and then the last episode we did out in Newport, which was different, but we're back in our homeostasis, I think. So it's good for being able to have those like comfortable discussions, and we're trying to crank out more episodes for you guys. So
so stay tuned.
So
this episode, Jordan and I have been wanting to do this one for a while now, probably since like January. So we're really excited we're able to do it. It kind of kept getting pushed on the back burner, but basically, like, I think the inspiration for this episode came from us being like really frustrated, with like the education system and even like the education style that we kind of were given, of kind of like memorizing and not like being taught to like question or like critically think or like synthesize ideas and come to our own conclusions, and kind of seeing how that's resulted in the world being filled with professionals in different industries, and they just are repeating what they're hearing from like the quote unquote experts and not really sharing their own like investigations or own conclusions. And so that's kind of like at a very high level what I think inspired this episode and like the sense of urgency to do it now.
Yeah. When we first thought of the concept of sort of breaking down what the difference between regurgitating information versus synthesizing knowledge, we wrote it down, and I think we thought, that could be enough to talk about in a whole episode. And then we kind of always had it on the back burner. But when we finally got to really getting in this mindset and writing out some notes like we have here, oh my gosh, I have realized this is like one of the most all-inclusive topics that we've ever discussed on this show. And it really does correlate to everything, not only in recent history, but what's happening right now and will continue to happen. So it's super vital. And I think there's a lot of philosophy and sort of breaking down of like verbiage and like understanding the meanings of these words. I think that a lot of what we are used to doing with just our normal vocabulary is we just say things and we just regurgitate these words, and we're so used to even just saying words that we don't even really take a step back to understand what we're saying sometimes. So
and it goes from like just our daily words, like we have a few different examples, but it transpires into like even ideas and even how you go about your like career. Like, for example, journalists are supposed to be the people, the industry that question everything, that come to their own conclusions. They're doing their own research. They're asking questions. They're changing their articles as new information comes out. They're not afraid to say if they made a mistake. And that's the opposite right now. Our mainstream journalists are propaganda machines. They repeat things that the experts say.
Yeah.
They don't bring their own
There are so many standards
research
that they have to fit into, or else they're not going to get published, or they're going to get fired from the New York Times, or they're going to get canceled from the journalism world. And it's sad because standards can only help in so many ways. Actually, I think it's admirable to have people who are willing to break certain standards if it's needed. To pursue truth and explain truth and to awaken. That's what journalism is supposed to do. I think it's supposed to introduce new ideas in a way.
Yeah, like as Tim Dillon said, there's literally only like 5 journalists left in the world. One of them being Glenn Greenwald, who lives like in Brazil because it's like kind of too risky for him to even live in the US at this point. And it's people that like him and some other journalists that like look at stories like the Epstein stuff or whatever, that mainstream people will only crack like the surface of it, and they won't get to like the real root of what's going on. Would you say
the real ones who are left are freelance journalists too, or are they under companies?
No, I would say they're freelance. Some of them have worked at bigger media houses like before, to get like the original like investigating journalism experience, but now they're all like either on Substack or like their own website or whatever.
Well, that makes sense, because they probably had tried those routes of working for companies, and then because they didn't fit their mold are now having to be decentralized and freelance in order to publish their stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like another industry where people are regurgitating and not synthesizing and like coming up to their own like conclusions and going through like the scientific method and that sort of thing is like the science community and medical field as well, especially with this whole COVID thing. Like we've seen people like Dr. Fauci, who has been working in government for decades, and he hasn't even been like in the field or been seeing like real patients, yet he's the one doctor that we're supposed to go to know everything about COVID or just diseases in general. And like that's not how science is supposed to work. Like Brett and Heather Weinstein were just on Rogan, and they were explaining that the whole point of science is for your work to get falsified by other scientists, and that's like the goal in order to like get at the truth of it. And you've said this, like science isn't dogmatic, it's ever changing.
No, there's only like very few aspects of science, which you could argue like math is an objective aspect of science that falls under that bracket. But I mean, science is ever changing. I mean, our universe is always growing. I mean, the earth is only going to continue aging. So yeah, it's not so set in stone, especially with health as we evolve and have new things that we face, like biologically, and everybody having different DNA. I mean, it's hard to group all of us under one cloud of treatment, under one cloud of strategy. So
yeah, and part of like good medicine is individualized care, and like that's something that we've seen slowly been lost in the medical industry in America,
because it takes up more time.
Yeah,
treating everybody individually sucks up more time, sucks up more money, is honestly requires more brain power and more different thinking. Routes, more critical thinking. Exactly. So in a way, regurgitating and grouping everybody's issues together saves money and time. So for like we always talk about on the show, that the medical field is a business, well, a compilation of a bunch of businesses, but their goal is to make money, or else they collapse and they can't pay for the manufacturing of drugs, and they can't distribute them to us, and they can't
make
pay
money.
their doctors. They can't help these doctors pay off their student loans for their 8 years of medical school or whatever it was. So yeah, it's a whole ecosystem of mini businesses.
Yeah, and then the last one that I wanted to highlight was like the teachers, and I think that also shows like this new generation of teachers that we have, and it's been happening like this slowly, I think, since the 60s, but now it's very apparent, is that these teachers, they've been taught how to educate, but they haven't been taught the information that they're teaching, if that makes sense. Like they've been taught how to teach, which is really just, how to like be an authoritarian essentially, and like manage a classroom and distribute information.
Or you just have a really great memory and you can do a lecture and it's solely based off memory and you don't even know what you're saying.
You don't know what you're saying. You're not, it's not like you've studied classical history, world history for 10 years and you know all about ancient civilizations, and you're able to come from that level of like expertise. And that used to like, at least you used to get that in college, but now we're like not even getting that in college. So it's slowly, that level of like expertise has left the classroom K through 8th through high school, and now it's not even in a lot of colleges anymore. So you're seeing like the ripple effect of our generation and the millennials and stuff. We haven't been properly educated to think for ourselves, to like research information, and you have that, us being super vulnerable to propaganda, and then you have propaganda being so prevalent like on social media and in our news, that we don't know how to synthesize our own ideas. Like we don't have that skill set, and we're floundering. And even smart people that I know are confused, and they think that things like ivermectin is a dewormer. Like it's stuff like that,
Yes. Well, I think that the notion of, I would love to talk more about the whole K through 8th situation. I was trying to look up what time of like American history did the education system switch to individual teachers to one teacher per class. I couldn't find anything, but I would assume at some point there was a time where we had specific teachers for specific subjects, even in those early grades, because wouldn't that maybe solve the problem a little bit more?
Yeah.
So that you have maybe more expert teachers only teaching what they're passionate about, what they know inside and out, as opposed to, say, one fourth grade teacher who is teaching all these subjects and she's preparing these lessons that are just from this textbook that she has to follow. And then when she's giving a lecture, it's just straight off of memory. And he or she, but yeah.
Or a reference point to a pre-made. I think that if I had to guess, it's a combination of two things. One, Common Core becoming mainstream. I don't know if you know what Common Core is.
What is that?
So it's basically like it's a nationalized version of like what education should contain, and even like some private schools follow it. Like I remember St. Thomas, the school that I went to, like we switched over to Common Core like when I was in middle school.
So it's like a whole curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, let me look up. I can look up the exact definition of it, but. Okay, so Common Core is a set of high-quality academic standards in mathematics and English language. It is informed by the highest, most effective standards from the state across the United States and countries around the world. So basically, like it draws teachers away from the good stuff and learning material that's like intrinsically interesting and worthwhile that can like impact people's minds. And it's a very standardized way of like checking, are people meeting certain requirements and going along this like system. So it's a very like nationalized protocol for regulating what children learn.
You could just
in
see my
education.
face right there right away.
So I think that if I had to guess, I don't know exactly when that came into effect. I didn't fully like divulge into this. It says around 2010. So it was like halfway through our education that this kind of went into effect. So I'd say that number one.
Sounds very robotic.
And then number two, I think that because like a lot of schools require teachers to now have like a master's specifically in education. Again, that's teaching people to be educators. It's not teaching them to be experts in a specific area. Whereas if you required everyone to have a master's in like world history, ancient civilizations, philosophy, science, something scientific, you know, I think that you would have teachers that were more equipped, that were like, oh, I studied evolutionary biology and I teach biology now, or I studied physics. And, you know, I think that because I would say that's part of it too, is that there's less people that are fully ingrained in that field. That
I would love to have, say, a high school educator who has gotten that master's in education degree come on the podcast to ask about that experience. And like, what do they emphasize? Do they, depending on what year or what semester in college, what is like, do they go subject by subject, or is it more just overall, this is how you handle young people, or this is how you phrase this a certain way? Is it way more about the language, or is it more about becoming an expert? Because I believe in generalism, and I think that you can expand your brain and become very skillful and knowledgeable at a lot of different subjects at one time. But if you're going to be a paid educator, supposedly teaching, say, college students to become near experts at something, which is why they're pursuing a degree, how can you be that knowledgeable in so many different subjects?
I mean, college might be different. I don't know. You'd have to look at all the colleges is not as regulated by the government. So I think colleges, you are going to get people that are more of an expert in that field teaching you, but that's kind of like a whole nother issue with different departments becoming more like kind of pushing out those professors and highlighting majors that are more like gender studies or things that aren't as like concrete. But
let's take college out of the picture then, and only analyze like high school and lower.
K through 8th, or sorry, K through 12th. Because like my experience for education, and I was fortunate enough to go to a private Catholic school, K through 8th, and then I went to a private all-girls Catholic school for high school. And I felt like I had very few classes and very few teachers that taught me how to critically think and how to like analyze things. I don't know what your experience was. I know we both went to Xavier, and it was a lot of memorization. It was a lot of...
High school was busy work for us. A lot of busy work. And honestly, that was how I got really good at sort of, I can admit it, like figuring out how to dupe the system. Like if I got certain systems down that I could maybe like cheat a little bit or like cut a few corners, like I was willing to do that because I felt like certain things were so much of busy work that I didn't see the ultra benefit of why I was doing it. I think in my younger grades though, I also went to a private school as well, although it wasn't Catholic. I did have a few classes that really did force me to have to try to think.
That's good. Yeah.
I felt like our testing curriculum in my middle school was very hard. And also like extracurriculars. I mean, I always was a sports kid. I was in band. Like I was also in a lot of extracurriculars that I do feel like forced me to sort of try to be a little bit different or think a little bit differently. But I would love to sort of be able to compare that to public school, although I didn't really have that experience. So if the core curriculum that you were just saying is more the public school focus, then yeah, I think that would be totally different.
Yeah, I think it's probably more mandated in public schools, but I know that some private schools have like adopted their own version of it, and we adopted it. I remember like, I think so 2010, I feel like I remember it around 5th grade-ish, it coming out. And my favorite classes honestly were like my theology or my like philosophy-based classes, because I felt like the teachers that I had for that, and then the teacher that I had in high school, those were the classes where if you had a good teacher, they would bring up like a controversial topic like abortion or euthanasia or I don't know what else is controversial at this point, but like those types of topics.
Everything.
Yeah, a lot of things. And we would have like debates, and people would present different sides of the argument. And
I love that.
we were allowed to like question things, even though it was a Catholic school. And like, obviously like a Catholic institution is going to have a position on something like abortion. The teachers that gave the students the freedom to debate those topics out and like analyze every side of the argument, those are the classes I like the best, because even if you do have a position, like having someone challenge you is just going to make your research stronger, make you think harder and all this stuff. But I did feel like even at St. Thomas, which was like my grade school, I do think that I had I had a really good history teacher during 8th grade. But like besides that, it was very teaching you to be a rule follower. We had to go to lunch, even in 8th grade, in two lines, one and both alphabetical.
That's
one
interesting.
was for hot, one was for if you brought your lunch. Like one was for if you were eating lunch there, and you had to go in order by last name. You could not speak.
In order?
You could not. This is even in 8th grade. Like we were treated like kindergartners. We could not speak in the line on the way to lunch. We couldn't speak really even like in the line out to cafeteria, like trying to get there. And I kid you not, if someone spoke or was giggling, we would walk all the way back to the classroom and then do it again and get yelled at. And like they would come out with like a ruler and like measure you.
You never told me this before.
No, it was like crazy. And I feel like that made me want to kind of be a little bit more like rebellious in my head. And I never was like the kid that would get called into the office or anything. But in my head, I just kind of was like, I don't like this. Like, this makes me uncomfortable. Like, this is stupid. Like, this is a stupid rule. This rule doesn't make sense. And I think that me questioning that at a young age has like helped with some of this like COVID stuff.
The skepticism started young for you.
Because like when I'm in situations where like the rules don't make sense to me, I think that's like what
I love that you thought
me.
that. Yeah. And you're obviously not making that up now. I mean, when you're going through that and you're trying to think, wait, why are we doing this? Like, what was put yourself in the teacher's shoes or in the administration's shoes. What was the benefit for them, the teachers, having you guys be in that line? Was it just easier to control? Or
I think easier to control, understand. But like discipline, like trying to teach discipline, like the school was very into discipline from an early age. And I understand,
which I respect,
like
but
little kids.
Certain aspects of discipline you can teach in certain aspects of life, but something like that, when else as an adult are you going to need to be in a single file line that restricted? That's not laying the foundation stones of discipline that's going to follow through in any other aspect of your adult life.
I agree. And I think that what was interesting too is like the whole point of receiving and education and becoming like a fully formed human, like is also to, I think, educate like your spiritual side and your conscience and like your ethics and morality. And it's like, here we are.
I would argue ethics and morality are the most important.
Here we are at a Catholic school, which is supposed to be informing our conscience so that we're able to go into the world and assess what the difference is between right and wrong, evil and good, and make those calls when there's no one above us telling us what to do. Like there's no like a parent or teacher.
Well, that's what adults are.
Yeah,
you
like,
have to be the one
you have
who
to,
can decipher
exactly.
between what's right and wrong.
And if that's the goal, how is walking in a single file line
exactly what is that like, what is that teaching you at a young age that's going to follow through in your adult life? Like what is that?
Unfortunately, what it teaches is the repeating of things. It teaches you to be a follower, not a leader. It teaches you to fall into this COVID trap that we're in right now.
It's like a weird way of conditioning you to be okay with
authoritarianism.
Something that's repetitive. It gets so,
you
get so used to it that you're just like, this is just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess maybe that pattern is pretty indicative in a lot of ways that we're seeing now.
It reminds me of, so I just took my real estate test yesterday in Phoenix, and
she passed.
I did pass, thankfully. There's no mask mandate here. It's actually like illegal, I think, to have like a mask mandate in Arizona. Well, I think it's up to the business to decide. But the like government agency that I went to like take this test, or it was like a third party group, on their website, like they have national locations all over. You could like check and look up the address and see if you had to wear a mask or not at that location. And mine said no. So I didn't bring a mask. I show up, everyone's wearing masks. And the sign on it says masks.
Uh-oh.
And my car wasn't here yet, so my mom had to drop me off like a kindergartner to take the test because I didn't have my car yet.
Mommy, keep the car running.
So I have zero car. I get dropped off, and this woman comes out, and she's like, she brings me in, and she goes, "Do you have a mask?" And I go, "No, your website said you don't need masks." And I'm like going down, like they have to take my picture, and she goes, "Well, you need a mask." And I was like, well,
okay, do you have one?
And she goes, "No." And I go, "Well, my mom just left and I'm in the middle of nowhere and I don't have a mask." So this guy who's also taking the test, he's like, "Oh, I have an extra one." He brings out like a dirty mask.
Ellen, no.
And I have to put it on.
That's disgusting.
And then I go in, and then they make me take my photo again. And I take my mask down and like take the photo. And she's like, "You stop looking traumatized. Like, you're fine. Like, smile." And I was like, "No, I'm not fine." But like, okay.
I'm pissed. I'm wearing some random person's dirty mask.
I put the dirty mask back on. And this like security monitor guy comes in, and he's like, "Okay, so these are the rules." He's like, "You're going to put your stuff in your locker." And he's watching me. It was like I was in jail. He goes, "And every time you pass by this hand sanitizer station," which was like this like moldy looking, really used. It was like, I don't want to use a hand sanitizer that has been touched by everyone. And he's like, every time you walk past it, you have to use the hand sanitizer. So I had to use it so I went to the bathroom, had to use it before the bathroom, went to the bathroom, washed my hands. He's like, "You need to use it again." And I'm like, "Really?" He's
that
like,
is so unnecessary.
Every time you pass, you have to use it. So then he takes me to my seat, and I was joking with him. I was like, "This is kind of intense." And he goes, "It's not. It's only intense if you make it intense." Sorry, this is a rant, but it's getting to a point. So then I'm like in front of my computer, and I'm sitting down, and he's like, "I'll be watching you the entire time. And if you take your mask off, that's one warning. And if you take it off again, I will confiscate your test and you have to go home." So I have to wear the dirty mask for like 4 hours while I'm taking this test. And he's watching everyone like a hawk take the test.
Dude, I'm so sorry.
I leave.
I'm so sorry.
And then I leave, and the woman gives me my results, and she's like, I go to look at them, and she's like, "No, you have to look at them outside." And I go, "Well, can I wait in here while my mom picks me up?" She goes, "No, you have
to them. Like,
you have to go outside and wait for your mom." So it's 100 and like 10 degrees outside, and I wait outside for like 20 minutes for my mom to pick me up. But my point is like that was like the adult version of us walking.
Of just completely unnecessary requirements that make no sense.
It made no sense. Like, it was crazy.
Can we also talk about how the hand sanitizer excess... Okay, I don't know all the science behind this, but I know that we have some good bacteria on our hands, as we do on a lot of other parts of our body.
Yeah.
It's same with our gut. Like we have good bacteria, we have bad bacteria. Antibiotics, which we know when you take an antibiotic, it kills all of the bacteria, the good too. Hand sanitizer does the same thing. We have good bacteria that gets killed. And so when we're repeating this usage of hand sanitizer every second, like that guy was making you do,
6 times.
which is so
Like,
unnecessary
crazy.
and completely bonkers, that is, I want us to try to get away a little bit from like all the hand sanitizer stuff, because there's got to be some sort of real ramification at some point from it. And
It's also just
and
chemicals.
it's not just your hands that are touching air particles, which COVID's supposedly an airborne virus, right? Your whole body would walk through a cloud of COVID particles.
Yeah.
It's not just your hands. Your hair, it could be all over your hair. Like it's more.
But this is a perfect
this
example.
yes.
Because, okay, these are like government employees, which I'm not speaking anything badly about government employees, but these are just people that, like, their mindset was, and I get it, like, their job's tough and it's annoying and it's like working for TSA. Like, I am so empathetic for these people, and if I was in that job, I see how it's easy to fall into that and just like follow orders, and especially if you have to provide for a family and you have no other choice.
Yeah.
I understand, like he isn't at the top making these decisions. He's just the enforcer. But at the end of the day, if enough people enforce the rules, that's how we get bad societies.
Do you think
know?
This person who was telling you all of these little intricacies of, you have to open your results outside, you have to get this hand sanitizer before and after, like, do you really think that there was a meeting, like a board meeting of all these government officials in these types of locations being instructed so detailed that was how it is? Like, do you think they had a pulled up map of the indoor like layout of the building saying, okay, we're going to place the hand sanitizer thing here, and every time you pass it here, you have to do it? Like, did it get to that level of detail?
I don't know, but it felt like it, because it was like, I've never been to prison, but if I was in prison, that's how I would imagine it to be, in terms of like how structured and intense and unnecessary, like well, I guess if you're in prison for like killing someone, that makes sense, like why it should be that structured. But like I didn't murder,
as it should be,
but I didn't murder anyone. I was just trying to take my real estate test, and I felt like very sorry, sounds so drama.
Well, it's honestly just like,
really
it's rude. It's dehumanizing, because anyone who's indoors in Arizona, anyone who lives in Arizona understands it's really hot in the summer. It's so uncomfortably hot right now. For the lady to just be like, you can't stay inside, you have to go outside. Like, are we giving up everything that's like sacred? Like, we're not like loving our neighbors the way we should. There's no community sense. It's just like, I don't care. You're a number. You just passed this test. Yeah. You're in our digital system. Who cares? See ya.
Exactly.
And there's no, oh wait, it's so outside. How about just stay inside for a few more minutes, enjoy the AC. You can hang out with me, and then when your mom gets here, you can leave. Like, that's how it should be.
Exactly. And yeah, you're right. And that goes, the point of the story again is because it's a perfect example of, if you just like blindly follow orders and don't take a minute to like be human and like, put that analysis on it and be like,
put yourself in that person's shoes, empathize with them. Okay, they just passed their test, or they just took the test. They really want to see the results. They want to do it in the AC where it's comfortable and the light isn't UV 100 facing down on them. Just like for a second, humanize. I think that is critical.
Humanize, and then critically think. I mean, if we're really trying to, if the goal of that office was to prevent COVID from spreading, me putting on a sweaty, dirty mask, me touching not a clean hand sanitizing station where everyone was touching it every 5 seconds, me having to sit outside in the heat with no water for 20 minutes, like, we're not thinking about safety or health, or we're not thinking about that critically. We're following orders, and we're not adjusting based off of the situation. And that goes back to like education, empowering people to have consciences, and being able to like think situationally, think situation by situation, as opposed to that one size fits all rules. that we have now for healthcare and other aspects. So that's why that example was like so frustrating to me, was because
we've talked about a lot of healthcare industry downfalls on the show. We talked about it a lot in the vaccine passport episode that we did. And I think in upcoming episodes, as much as, I mean, that's a topic I would say is really big for us. So I think a big aspect of overall healthcare and even just our knowledge on it, I think that might be one of the biggest realms that we have been taught to regurgitate over anything else, even from just a young age of like, you wash your hands, or you don't cough, you cover your mouth, or there are certain cues that we've been taught for
take an antibiotic
so long.
For any
take antibiotics.
Issues.
Fluoride on the teeth, which goes into your gut and is actually really bad for your gut health, which you get at the dentist.
The food pyramid. Remember the food pyramid? Remember the food pyramid? Remember you would go in, you get your lunch. I remember I was given like I had to like
How many classrooms had that one? Everyone knows this diagram. It's in every classroom. It's like a graphic design. One of the first like graphics that I ever saw. Yeah. It was like a laminated poster of the food pyramid everywhere you go in grade school.
With carbs at the bottom. You're supposed to have the most.
It's just like a bread loaf, and then like a wheat, and then it's like potatoes. Literally the worst things potatoes,
for you. And then there's finally some vegetables and fruit at the top, and then at the very top they have like
protein.
I think I have to pull it up but I know that like grains was at the bottom, and like dairy was at the bottom, like the things that are probably not the best for you.
Grain, okay. For sure, anything dairy and a lot of like enriched flours, whatever, all of these are the most like inflammatory foods for the body. It's not good. That should not be at the bottom. That should be completely flipped, and we should have more protein, fiber, rich foods at the bottom. That is how it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a dietitian, but I could tell you that if the majority of your food is carbs, it's probably not going to bode well, and that's probably why America has an obesity problem that's funded by our food industry and then is countered by our medical industry, where everyone's in these medical loops where they have like all these diseases that are caused by the stuff that they put into their bodies because they weren't educated.
I also think a lot of people forget that we've used the word carbs as sort of like a blanket term, which, I mean, carbs like that, bread, basically translate it turns into sugar when you digest it. And so healthy carbs, which are called complex carbs, that should be its own separate category. But we've grouped that with these sugar carbs so that they're all considered carbs, and people forget that it literally digests as sugar, which is horrible for you. Well, in large amounts.
My cafeteria, it had the food pyramid, and then it had the got milk situation next to it. So then they were advertising that we all drink like all this milk. No,
I know. What is that? You gotta drink milk to get taller. I was told that my whole life because I'm short. You know how many times I got it from like teachers too, that I needed to get on like a growth hormone because I was so short.
Really?
It was so disturbing. I don't think I've ever really confessed this to anyone, but I got it so much as a kid.
You're hearing it here.
And honestly, I kind of have a little PTSD from it because I always knew in my head, I'm like, I'm fine. I'm healthy. Like, I'm normal. People are short, whatever. And I just I got told, drink more milk, Jordan, do this or that. And I'm like, what? Show me the evidence that if I drink a bunch of milk, that's going to make me 5 inches taller.
I want to know the net worth of these like milk lobbyists that went to the schools, because I mean, I remember like we would have strawberry chocolate and regular milk, and you had to pick one milk. Like you weren't allowed to just like be like, okay.
Wait, depending on the day, or did you have like a plan where you had to say, I want chocolate milk?
No, it was all in like a bucket. It was like, okay, like in cartons, okay?
Oh, okay.
So you would you'd start in the lunch line, you'd pick what of those 3 milks you would want, and you put it onto your tray. And then like they would give you all the food and stuff. And our principal that we had up until 3rd grade would do this thing where she would she would stand. She was this like nun.
Great visual.
So she was this like
a standing nun.
So she was this like chubby nun, but she didn't have a habit because she was one of those like progressive nuns. So we have this like chubby old.
Did she have a Segway?
What? No, she didn't
Segue?
have a segue,
Okay.
but we had another one that had a segue. So she would sit at the door that would like lead to the playground for recess. And you'd have to bring up your tray to her and she would check. And if you didn't eat enough of the food or drink the milk, she would send you back. I'm not even kidding you. And so, like, I didn't like French fries as a kid. I didn't like a lot of unhealthy. This is going to sound so. Okay, I didn't like a lot of unhealthy foods as a kid. Like, I didn't like hot dogs. I didn't like French fries. I didn't like chips.
I hated soda. I didn't
like soda, but I did like cookies and sweets and that sort of thing. So I would like not eat those types of things on my lunch tray. Plus, I think girls like don't need as much food as guys. And she would like, I would get sent back to like eat French fries because I wasn't eating enough. But it's like French fries aren't healthy. Like it made no sense.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Are they just trying to like not waste food, or
it just goes back to this like
it does regurgitating rules because they have been so standardized and so habitual that it's like we just got to keep doing it.
Yeah,
and no one ever takes a step back and is like, hold on, is this dehumanizing? Is this unhealthy for our students? Is this unhealthy for us? Could we be doing this better? I think that exercise needs to be occurring constantly in everyone's minds as you're going throughout daily life. I feel like, okay, so the last month I came back home and I've been like reorganizing my life and like certain systems, even sometimes with how you have your folders or how you do notes or how you do tasks. I think it's good every now and then to go, okay, hold on, how can I make this better? How can I make this more efficient? Really break down, was this the best way that I could be doing this?
Yeah.
That has to happen. I mean, that's just a really small analogy that really doesn't even mean anything. I just thought of it, but
no, it's good.
I think that it's something so basic that can literally apply to every aspect of life.
Yeah. No, I agree. And something that I want to talk about too that I think would combat a lot of these issues that we're having in the education system is classical education. And this is something, so my cousins actually go to like a classical education school like here in Phoenix, and it's a charter school, so that means that like you're getting private school education but you don't have to pay, and it's a lottery system, so you like apply and whoever's like picked out gets to go.
Yeah, I love that.
So they go to a school here, and it's a great book school. So basically like they learn from the original text and they follow that structure of like that article that I sent you.
Yep.
And I think that it would be really cool if a lot more schools kind of took on this model and worked away from the Common Core, because I think understanding like historical context and understanding like the root of where information has come from is really a valuable like skill set, and will be applicable to whatever you decide to do as an adult, whether it's
That's
a
timeless,
trade
I think.
or a career after college,
The thing that stood out to me the most in that article was it included that children younger than 5th grade have a mental predisposition during those early years to naturally ask more why questions, which is why kids are so inquisitive. Like if you're reading a book or they're like, what's this or what's that? Like they more naturally ask those why questions. But then at 5th grade and above, the brain starts to naturally be more factual, based.
What it said was the early years of school is spent absorbing facts, systematically laying out the foundations for advanced study. Then in middle school or middle grades, students learn to think through arguments and start asking those why questions. Then in high school, they learn to express themselves and share their arguments. So like, I guess when you're really young, learning like the facts and kind of the root of like grammar and that sort of thing is like the best time to learn that. Like even to learn a second language, it's always best to do that.
Yeah, because your neurons are just like so flexible.
And then it's like figuring out those why questions and thinking through like arguments, and then it's learning how to
applying
those arguments.
Yeah.
So it's like foundation, why, express. Like it's kind of following that like flow.
That makes sense. Yeah, no,
Which
that's really
makes
cool.
a lot of sense.
So when you say classical education, how would you define? Is it really just this breakdown, emphasizing those steps?
Yeah. So basically, like for example, like astronomy, for example, like it isn't just studied in isolation. So it's learned alongside the history of scientific discovery, which leads into like the church's relationship with study and like all the intricacies that comes with that. So it's basically like you take a topic, like algebra or whatever, and you're not learning it in isolation. You're learning how it connects with other aspects of the world. So like with the astrology stuff, you're looking at, okay, how does that fit in with science, but also history, but also religion or like traditional religions, because like there was a lot of things with like the Catholic Church and the stars and all that stuff. So you're connecting all the dots so that when you see something in the modern world, you have historical reference of that same. You're recognizing patterns, and you're also recognizing how to link ideas together to form like ideas and conclusions. And I think especially with the COVID stuff, because basically like our education teaches us to think in isolation, we're really bad right now at like connecting all of the dots, even if they're really obvious about what's been happening with all the COVID stuff, you know?
Yeah. I would assume since elementary schools and at least like the public school system is still keeping kids masked and still keeping kids like socially distanced while they're at school, I would assume they're not doing as much like group work, correct?
Probably.
That's something that I had when I was in middle school and elementary school, and it was huge because I felt like any like group project that I had was like so much more fun. Anything that wasn't testable, I pretty much enjoyed because I was so anti-test for some reason. I didn't like it. But yeah, I think that like collaboration too, where you're like having to balance the social aspect of working with your team and pulling your weight and analyzing everyone else's input, but also sort of having to critically think, because most group projects required a project prompt that was more critically thinking based as opposed to just copy this or memorize this or repeat this. It wasn't really like that for those types of assignments.
Yeah, no, I think a combination of like group work, doing things that aren't just like memorizing things for tests, having historical context, being able to have those references, and also just kind of like having, I don't know, being excited about learning, because I think that if we just treat education like this thing that we have to do, we have to learn this stuff, and there's no excitement or personal connection, then when you become an adult, you don't have to learn anymore. You can just do your job, watch TV, chill out, go on social media. Like that's why I feel like a lot of my friends don't understand what's going on in the world, because you have to be curious to research what's happening, you know, and actually like uncover what is going on.
You have to care in a way. You and people normally only care about things when they apply to them. And so when you think that that something doesn't apply to you, or that some bad policy that you don't necessarily believe in doesn't apply to you, then you're not going to even care about investigating it.
Do you think that we've had it for so...
Go ahead, sorry.
Do you think we've had it good for so long here that we can't imagine like a policy directly
definitely
affecting us, you know?
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, my parents, I think I got the skepticism and hopefully the critical thinking, like natural ability from them. So they think very similar to, I'd say, how you and I do. But I have faced a lot of adults, especially even this summer when I was traveling, who say a political conversation gets brought up or a topic that's going on in current events right now. It's like there are so many adults that just are naturally like, they just kind of shove it off, or it's like they can't wrap their heads around it. They're like, this isn't America. This isn't the America that I know. This isn't the America that I believe in. And it's so hard for them to actually wrap their head around it because they've never actually experienced it in a very personal, in-person way. So now when they are, like, COVID is probably like the first thing that a lot of adults, and especially Gen X, millennials, have faced. So yeah, COVID's like pretty much the groundbreaking thing for our gen. And thankfully, I'm you know what, I'm grateful in a way that we had it in early 20s while our brains are still malleable. Like, our brains aren't even fully developed until we're 26 years old. So I'm grateful that we're young and going through this, because it has taught me so much. And I'm glad that I didn't get to 60 years old and having our first like really big wave of inconvenience and education, that stuff can happen even in first world America when you have everything that you think you have at your disposal. So I feel like if we would have made it to that age, we would have had a maybe more of a probability of being like, I don't know, just sort of in denial.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's why like the baby boomer generation, which has been kind of, they control the most wealth in the country. They've lived during the most prosperous time because they lived after World War II. They weren't participants in it, but they benefited from the economic boom that followed that. And then they benefited from American expansion and just kind of us becoming the superpower of the world and no one really messing with us.
Yep.
Whether or not you agree with that, that's for a different conversation. But I think that when I've interacted with grandparents or just people of that age, I've been a little bit frustrated because they get it. Some of them do, but some of them are, like you said, in denial or think that this will just like all blow over.
Yeah.
And like I have to sit them down and like I really want that generation to understand how critical not complying with any of this COVID stuff is, because it will dictate what our generation goes through and what all the other future generations go through.
Our kids.
And our kids.
Yes.
And everyone has to get on board with like critically thinking through this and stepping up and banding together, because this is serious. Like we don't want to be Australia. We don't want to be New Zealand. Like, no.
Canada. I think we've mentioned this before on other episodes, but we'll repeat it again. But you have to find that balance between thinking across all different time frames, looking into the past, analyzing the now, and predicting the future. And you have to find that balance of whatever the decision is or whatever the ideology that you're dissecting, like really look at it from all of those time frames, because what we decide now affects the future. And it is important to look in the past to sort of as a gauge and a moral compass in a way, comparing ourselves to mistakes we've made in the past and whatever. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that we can't be in denial of, oh, okay, this is happening now, but one day we'll just wake up and it's gone. Steps have to be taken, and proper steps have to be taken in order to improve situations now. And that doesn't just happen overnight. That happens through hard work. That happens through discipline. That happens because of people who want to make things actually be enacted. It's not just, oh, we listen to the news and that's the only obligation we have.
Yeah.
We have to be speaking on these issues. We have to be talking about it. This is literally why we do this, because even just repetition is a huge factor when it comes to a lot of these complex ideas, because we're talking about really hefty, like multidimensional things that have to be dissected in a million different ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's been a lot of examples like in current events right now, and we've touched on some of them, but where we haven't been critically thinking, we haven't been going through like past events to analyze future events and kind of understand the outcomes. And I mean, there's been a lot of stuff between the Afghanistan stuff and the COVID stuff. Like there's just been so many examples right now. Like even just, I mean, I don't know, did you want to talk about the Afghanistan thing and how that whole thing went down?
Yeah. I guess we could first say that, well, shout out to, I mean, it's still ongoing right now. I mean, it's still a crisis that is not going to be over anytime soon.
There's still Americans
but
trapped
our
there,
prayers go out to the families who lost family members, Marines who passed away. And there were 13. I mean, that's a big number. And it was tragic hearing that. It was a focal point that I rarely saw on certain social media sites like Twitter. The people that I follow on Twitter were posting their kind words and memorial sort of messaging around it. But I saw nothing about it on Instagram, saw nothing about it really on Facebook. It wasn't anywhere close to being as blown up as say, the rioting was last year, the protests last year, or some other deaths of certain individuals.
Or even the heartbeat bill. I feel like there was more posts about that in Texas, even from people that like don't live in Texas, then
aren't affected by that bill whatsoever.
Then the Afghanistan thing, where that affects, like, like that affects kind of all of America, and there's like Americans that are stuck there, and there's people that died.
Our military is a big like sort of global representation of us, because our military goes to a lot of these countries and they are supposed to act in ways that like represent our morals and our ethics, and our Marines that we had over in Afghanistan that we saw these shots of them giving water to families that were sitting there at the airport in the heat for long hours of the day. Like they showed those, right? They showed all those images, but then it's like when we are supposed to be covering these bombings that happened, we don't get that. Those dead Marines don't get that glorification.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and something that was interesting about that was that I agree. Like we should have been we should have never been in Afghanistan to begin with. Like I
agree.
Totally do not like the military industrial complex. Like that's a whole nother episode. But the reality is we were there. We had to get out of there. We had already negotiated a deal back with Trump in February with the Taliban. And we had all summer to get them out. And I don't understand. I mean, I'm not a military person. I don't know. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than we expected. It's not easy getting out of a country like that. I totally understand. But it just showed how the whole thing was a lie. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because a lot of us bought into it. Like when 9/11 happened, that was super traumatic for the country. That was an attack like on our shores, and we reacted swiftly and we went into all these countries, whether that was always kind of the goal or
the
predetermined
goal.
Or temporary. I don't know, but it was wrong. We shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have had the Patriot Act. And we were telling the Americans that the reason we were there was we were training the Afghanistan army to be able to fight their own battle there, and that we had everything under control this whole time, and that there wasn't a terrorist issue. And we leave within less than 24 hours and the country's in flames at the airport. So it just shows that like we weren't questioning the military for 20 years. We were not questioning them. We weren't questioning why they were there. I mean, some people were, but a lot of journalists...
It was totally forgotten. It was just like, oh yeah, we're just there.
We're just here and we're going to stay here indefinitely. And what they were even doing wasn't... I don't even know what we were doing. Like, why were we paying? Like, their army couldn't even defend themselves against the Taliban. So we obviously
collapsed in less than 24 hours.
So we spent 20 years and
are we that bad at training? Like our repertoire is horrible now.
Well, yeah, it's like that's the lie. Like we spent billions of dollars over there for a failed army that couldn't defend themselves within 24 hours, and we didn't question that for 20 years. And so I just think that exposes how easily manipulated we can be.
That goes back to the regurgitating and synthesizing thing too.
Yes.
It was just like, oh, all right, we're here, but it's on the back burner, and like we'll keep it in our brains, but we're not going to actually revisit it and try to coordinate another strategy of getting them out. Just sort of fixing the entire situation.
Yeah.
That I agree that we needed to get them out, but it didn't have to be this summer. It didn't even have to be by the end of the year. It needed to be however long it should have taken in order to do it properly.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know how long that would have been. I don't know
exactly because we had negotiated. I don't know all the specifics, but we had negotiated a deal that we'd get them out by a certain date. But the problem is that then I need to look back at all the specifics, but then that was what Trump negotiated. And then Biden came in and did it differently and waited till the last minute to pull everyone out. Mm-hmm. So that was the issue, was that we waited till the last minute.
Okay, then say the August 31st date was the literal last date in their agreement, in the original agreement.
Which I don't know what
you're
the
right.
exact
We would have had the
was,
entire year so far to do it, but instead we've been focused way more on other issues that I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we left $85 billion worth of weaponry and equipment, and
which is just like, why aren't people upset about that? Like
$85 billion.
What's weird? Okay,
I'm sorry, that's insane.
This is what's weird. Okay, so let's say you're on the left. Traditionally speaking, you're supposed to be against military spending. That's like a left-leaning position, and you're supposed to think, okay, I'm against military spending. I want to cut that part of the budget, and I want to reallocate those funds to something like universal health care or universal basic income or some sort of like
school system,
something like that. And I used to be like, oh, we're America. We need to have the strongest military, all this stuff. And I've changed my opinion on that. And I've come to like, okay, we spend way too much on the military. We're in all these countries. We don't need to be doing this.
Like, just bring everybody home.
Let's bring everyone home.
We can't even get peace here. Let's get that first.
Let's just be
and then talk about sending people everywhere.
Yeah,
else.
let's stop being an empire. So I actually adapted a left-lean position. But what's weird is that all my friends that claim that they're on the left, and they aren't really, they've just prescribed to the mainstream narrative and don't question it. But you would think that if they were truly on the left, they would call out the $85 billion that we left in military equipment there and say, wow, this money could have been used
in so many different ways.
Give people better health care. This money could have been used to give people better education. Whatever their left-leaning government spending thing that they would rather that money be why didn't I see outrage over that from the left
or
a good people that follow the mainstream? Why? Because they actually aren't on the left. They are brainwashed and they're following the mainstream narrative and they're following whatever the main journalists are throwing at them, and they're focusing on things like horse dewormer, and they're not focusing on that. And they don't really care because at the end of the day, they weren't taught to have their formed conscience to really inform like what issues are important to them and that they should be fighting for and they should be calling out. But instead, they're just reposting all the stuff that the government wants you to be focused on. And that's the issue, is that these people,
aligning with pop culture too.
Yeah, you're a lot. You think that you're being countercultural, but you're just playing it safe. And you want to call out the issues when you've been given the go ahead, the green go, that you can speak on this. You know, and that's what's so frustrating about all this, is that it wasn't this like right or left issue. It was an American issue, and there was a lot of commentary that could have been said and dissected, and not that many people participated in dissecting.
Yeah. And something that really frustrated me in correlation to the entire Afghanistan situation is like, unfortunately, we had a couple hurricanes that sort of paved in right after. And then because we've had all these Delta, Mu, Lambda, Chi freaking variants all going on. Yeah, exactly. We're going to go get through the entire Greek alphabet at this point with all these variants. I don't even know how they can decipher between them, but whatever. So all of this other news had come right after the Afghanistan thing. And then when say Biden does a press conference, especially with the Hurricane Ida situation, he just was like, I'm here to talk about Hurricane Ida. Like, we're done with that. Like, Afghanistan, that was a last week issue. Like that news cycle's over with. Now we're on to the next thing. And it's like, are people not picking up on that? You can't subvert by focusing on other issues. And I would say, okay, we have hurricanes every summer. We know this. August, and especially like the California, Baja, that Gulf of Mexico area, we are always having hurricanes.
But this is a really
which it was a big one.
It was a big one. It needed
but
attention.
That doesn't mean that $85 billion of our country's materials that has just been handed to extremist terrorists in Afghanistan isn't a big issue, as we're on the eve of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 this week, and there are so many other things going on. It's just like, stop doing that. I don't like the way that that he said that.
Yeah, I think that he has a lot to be addressing right now, and the fact that he's gonna just pick and choose the topics that he's focusing on, even if there are two issues that are of equal importance. And also the thing about the Afghanistan, yes, the hurricane's important, but it's nature cause, not administration cause. Like, it's not human cause. So like, that's also a differentiator. And also, I mean, let's talk about Kamala Harris, who's been campaigning for Newsom while like the country is dealing with all these other issues, and just completely, I don't know. I
think that she's just been kind of on her own little path. I don't know who's been coordinating her agenda, but yeah, she's been all over the place, and kind of, she's never been in a hot hot button place when she's needed to be.
Yeah.
Like she's always somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're doing it, but
Yeah.
that's a good, I like that you at least brought it up and addressed it because.
Yeah. But another thing though is that people, I was surprised, like people took, I mean, I don't know if surprise is the right word at this point, but I was intrigued by how much media coverage this got was the horse dewormer hoax that was going on. I want to break down really quickly just what ivermectin is for people that aren't aware. I think we've talked about this on the podcast, but there are two kinds of ivermectin. There's one for animals and there's one for people. The one for people is FDA approved. It's treated for parasites. And
the chemist won the Nobel Prize, correct? In 2015?
So the chemist won the Nobel Peace Prize. It's been in use since 1985. It's about, or 81, excuse me. It's about as safe as aspirin or Tylenol. And it's been historically referred to as the wonder drug by the scientific community. Basically, now the issue is that people are saying, okay, well, that's all great, but it's not approved for COVID by the FDA, which is true, but it doesn't mean that it can't be used for COVID. It doesn't mean that there isn't anecdotal evidence. It doesn't mean that there hasn't been smaller studies in other countries. And again, like this goes back to like questioning and looking to the why and not just taking like what the experts say on face value, because ivermectin is a generic drug, so there's no money to be made from it. Also, if it gets proven, if it gets accepted by like the FDA that it is a drug that can be treated for COVID, basically what happens is all the vaccines that we've approved for emergency use become illegal. Because the only reason they were approved for emergency use is because there's no other treatment available. But if you can say that ivermectin is a treatment for COVID, then those improvements,
they cancel each other out.
They cancel each other out, essentially. Yeah. And the issue is that we've signed a blank check with the pharmaceutical company Pfizer.
Sorry, I just started the clip.
We signed a blank check with the pharmaceutical company Pfizer, and I think about 100 countries around the world have signed this, where basically we're like, okay, we'll keep paying you whatever you need. So it's different for every country. I think Israel's paying $69 a dose. I think we paid around like $18 or $19 a dose for Pfizer. So It's like really inconsistent. All these countries, poor countries, have to have their assets like literally like buildings and different assets laid out in the contract as collateral. All the countries take all the liability, which means no one can sue Pfizer. And that's why the FDA said that they approved Pfizer. But what they did is they approved a second version of the Pfizer drug that has the same chemical composition as the emergency use one. But the emergency use one is the one they're still distributing. So people think that they're getting the FDA approved one, but they're really getting the emergency one
that was with that first deal.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have a reaction to that and you want to sue Pfizer and you think it's FDA approved, so you can sue Pfizer. You have
no ground.
You have no grounds. And that's because the government's stuck in this
it's so slimy
with Pfizer. Because they did this contract deal with Pfizer where they wrote them a blank check.
We just sold ourselves out.
We just sold ourselves out to a pharmaceutical company. So we're now owned by Pfizer in terms of what our COVID policy is. So when Biden comes on,
not only financially and resource-wise, but biologically too.
Yeah, good point. So what's your take then when Biden comes on yesterday and gives his speech? Like, is that authentic?
No. That was one of the most uncomfortable speeches I've ever listened to him give. It was terrifying. I'm not even gonna censor myself on that. I felt like it was inappropriate in a lot of different ways, and I think that anyone who's seen the clips could understand. Yeah. But in terms of him saying that, there's no truth in terms of that. He basically lied.
Yeah. I mean,
he didn't give anybody that breakdown of what this deal and what our relationship with Pfizer is, or what these FDA approved vaccines are, that we're not getting them yet. We don't have them yet. No one that's getting this vaccine right now, they're getting the emergency shots. There's no explanation on that.
No, and that's what they want, because they want you to be confused that you're like, there's people that are waiting like for that FDA approval.
Well, because they don't think people are going to do their homework.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of public officials, a lot of even doctors, healthcare officials are not inferring that people do their homework. And honestly, they're probably right. I don't think a lot of people do their homework.
No.
And so maybe their reasoning as to why they don't explain further is because they don't think people will, when actually they should encourage people to do their homework, because that's always a good means to have like another second guess and another confirmation of whatever they're being.
Do you think it's a problem we've become so specialized so that we take information on face value from quote unquote experts and we don't question it and we don't?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have this idea of authorities in our brains as like sort of gods in a way, that they know all because they have whatever degree or whatever PhD from whatever university. And well, that rhymed. But we have to kind of get that complex little out of our heads in a way. I think always respecting all adults, respecting authorities in some sense. But I believe that if they have proven to have lied about something, or if they have proven to have something be incorrect that they spoke on and didn't back themselves up, or didn't apologize, or didn't clear the air after they were caught, that they've lost their credibility. I don't think that we should be continuing to give credibility to some of these authority figures who have proven to not be credible, or have proven to be liars, like routine liars. Like Fauci, for example. Yeah. He should not have any credibility at this point.
He shouldn't be in his position right now, because
let alone the highest paid government official that we have in America at the moment.
Which is also an interesting question. I would love to know why that is, but but what's interesting about him and like the whole gain of function thing is that like we're sitting here focusing on vaccinated, unvaccinated, who's spreading what, when it doesn't matter, because the vaccine doesn't prevent transmissibility. You know, when if Trump's in office, it's his fault for spreading the virus. If Biden's in office, it's his fault for like his policies are spreading the virus. We're focusing on all this like right left stuff, when really it's like, why don't we like get to the bottom of why we have this virus in the first place, especially with the gain of function stuff that got leaked, with understanding that we were funding the lab in Wuhan that was doing gain of function research, which is extremely dangerous.
Prior to the virus
unleashing. And like, why don't we uncover that story and put a bunch of money into figuring that whole situation,
that'd be nice.
That doesn't happen again?
I think that would provide some clarity in a sense, or maybe if it's not 100% verifiable quite yet, at least it raises more why questions. I don't see us having a societal inclination towards asking why questions all the time. We're kind of just, or maybe we have a one phase of asking why questions, and then once we have established a routine, then we kind of just get stuck in it for a while. Like how I feel like we're in this, like right now, we are almost a year and a half in a limbo period where we're not fully back to the way it was before, but we're not as locked down or as quarantine as we were, say, in April or March of last year. But we're now so used to it. Like, this is the norm. I don't see a lot of people going back to that foundation of, okay, why are we in this? Why is this limbo still here? Why is this laying around? So I encourage people to do that, or at least encourage your friends to do it. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like this is why propaganda right now is so easy. Like, we think about propaganda as like, oh, we're smarter than that. Like, that was a thing of the past. That was what Nazi Germany did. That's what Soviet Russia did. And we're smarter than that. And we have our phones and we have Google, so we can look and fact check for ourselves.
I'm glad you brought this up.
But like, I wanted to talk about, you're saying the FUD thing, and I think that ties into this. And just, I don't know, us thinking that the answers are going to be the first thing on Google. Like, no, it's not that easy anymore.
Yeah. I don't know where I came across this FUD acronym, but it was like someone said it in a sentence, and I think that I Googled it. And I mean, as we know from Google, you have to scroll down all the way to the bottom. Sometimes you can't
Or
just
go
take
on DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, or do DuckDuckGo. Another great search engine. But I researched FUD, and it's an acronym for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And basically, it's a propaganda tactic. It's a whole strategy of sort of whatever it is that you're trying to promote or direct people's attention to. It's doing it through using fear tactics and doubt tactics and to put people in uncomfortable situations so that you can get them to do what you want them to do or buy a product that you want them to buy. Mm-hmm. And I actually see this a lot with like a lot of medication commercials where they try to say, I can't, I'm an older person, I can't play with my grandkids, or I can't go to trick-or-treating with my grandkids, or something like that, which isn't like an overt fear topic to instill, but it's something that sort of makes you feel relatable, as in, oh, that makes me uncomfortable, I don't want that. And that's a very small example. I mean, this can obviously be blown up into a large scale in a lot of different ways, but I think with the lockdowns and with being called a grandma killer or some of these things, they're utilizing FUD tactics to make us be fearful of having certain titles or being canceled or being ostracized from society because we did something wrong or morally, ethically, biologically, health-wise wrong, when actually I don't think it's a case-by-case scenario. Well, it totally depends.
And even like people reusing the word, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. It's like, okay, let's break down that word. What if someone's gotten all their other vaccines? Are they an anti-vaxxer? What if it's someone who's paralyzed from the neck down and they have a lot of health issues? They have a lot of pre-existing conditions. Maybe they're born with it. Maybe that is a very special case scenario. Mm-hmm. You have the balls to call that person anti-vaxxer? Yeah. Or I've seen people who've gotten the vaccine and maybe they had a bad reaction to it, and then they are like, they're not even saying their opinion on it. They're just explaining what happened to them, and people will call them an anti-vaxxer. And I'm like, wait a second, but they got the vaccine, so how are they anti? And then what if you don't want the boosters because the boosters are coming?
So you got the vaccine, but you don't want to get the boosters. So then are you anti-booster?
Are you anti-vax? Like, what is
yeah.
And why aren't they just calling the booster a vaccine? Like, I don't think I've ever. Have we had boosters? We've had the term booster shots before.
I think flu shots, people use the term booster with those sometimes.
Okay.
Because it's supposed to be like a yearly thing, but that's the only other context I've heard it in.
Maybe there's other ones. I don't know, but I just feel like that's an example. You were talking about like terms that we repeat and we don't even think about the definition. Mm-hmm. Liberal, that's another one. Like people have forgotten that liberal means you're for the maximum amount of freedom for people, and that you question the government and you
don't trust the government.
You don't trust big corporations. You don't trust big pharma.
You want decentralization normally.
Yeah, and you're for more like social things, more social issues, and we've forgotten that too. So
yeah, we use the term liberal now as more of like a identifier for like a group of people, like almost more of like a noun as opposed to a belief system.
Well, it is a noun too, I guess, but
we reference it or reimagine it more as the noun of what this group of people is, as opposed to what the actual traditional sense of the word means, which is I think people forget that. Even if
it does mean people that think that way, the people that, like, I have friends that say they're a liberal, but I'm like, you aren't a liberal. Like, what you support big pharma, you support government overreach, you aren't calling out military spending, you aren't calling out bringing translators here, getting our troops home. Like you aren't calling out that we've wasted money overseas that could have been used domestically for the programs you say you care about. Mm-hmm. You aren't caring about getting kids back in schools, education, something you care about. All
those are anti-freedom,
You're not for
order.
labor unions of people that don't want to be forced to get vaccinated. So even if you are saying, okay, that word is a noun, those people aren't following the definition of even the noun. So it's just like,
that's true.
What's going on? Like you're identifying with something and you don't even, what you believe isn't even what that thing is supposed to traditionally believe in, you know?
They more fall alongside the pop culture.
Yeah, pop
media,
culture, mainstream.
yeah.
Like your opinion isn't
Maybe
liberal,
there should
it's
be a whole
mainstream.
political party for that, the regurgitators.
Yeah.
People who just sort of look to that guide and then morph to it.
Exactly.
And it's never questioning the guide. It's never analyzing the guide. It's never breaking things down to the foundation. It's just, okay, yeah, that's me. Yeah. That's a good point. I know. I know everyone's different. Everyone's brains are wired differently, but I do think that it's kind of peculiar how many people are following this pattern of the mass regurgitation, as opposed to trying to figure out how to synthesize in a healthy way. Or maybe there's a balance between the two. I mean, I regurgitate sometimes, especially when I read articles or even when we do this podcast. Like, I do think there's a healthy amount of regurgitation that goes into certain thoughts that we've had while we're thinking of how to prepare for this topic or thinking about how to remember what we read in a book. Or there are healthy regurgitating mechanisms that do happen that are caused by our memory retrieval, and then we articulate it and we're able to discuss it and whatever. But when it's the regurgitation at the level of big ideas in your life and our lifestyle and our overall society's health, not just biologically, but like morally, ethically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, these are things that we're not supposed to be having that sort of wingman regurgitation. We're supposed to be really critically thinking. Yeah. So, I'm a little concerned, but
yeah. What do you think? What would you say? Well, so if our solution to that is synthesizing, what is that? Like, what is the definition of that, do you think?
Well, I have some written down here, but I'm going to explain off the top of my head. I think that synthesizing is sort of pulling a lot of different realms of knowledge together. Literally, I mean, we were talking about subjects in school at the beginning of this episode. An analogy with that can be pulling knowledge from all these different subjects, from all these different industries, aspects of life, ages that you learned a lesson from something that you did wrong. It's so multidimensional. It is not just, oh, I read this somewhere, so this must be true. Or, oh, I felt this way, so I am morally obligated to change society because I feel this way, or whatever that is. It's so much more multidimensional than we think. And I mean, the word synthesis comes from science, which is synthesizing chemicals together, normally ones that are completely different but somehow blend. Synthesizing is a word for blending. It's not a wrong reaction or whatever. So I think that I want people to, I mean, the whole point of us talking about this synthesizing regurgitation topic is we don't want to just regurgitate. We want to break it down. So breaking down the word synthesis is that, the nature of it. So yeah, we should probably say that at the beginning of this, but
no, I think that it's good that we went through this. Like we went through
lessons with us.
We went through what the current state is, what the issues are, and then hopefully like the solution to it. I think one thing is if you are someone that has kids and you don't have access to doing like the more classical education style, because there aren't a ton of schools that do that still, I would encourage people to, if they have free time with their kids, pull out some of these classic textbooks, like the Iliad and Greek mythology and history, and just kind of give them that education and just that knowledge base, and also just tell them like, hey, you don't have to listen. It's not like you don't have to you should always behave in school, but like if a teacher says something that you disagree with, like come talk to us about it, and like let's hear your perspective on it, and we can talk through like why their position might be a little bit off and why you might actually
don't just get shut down.
Yeah, don't just get shut down. And if your kid is getting shut down at school, like make sure that they can come to you and be open to that. And if you're someone that doesn't have kids and is maybe more our age, I don't know, I would recommend that you just continue to be a skeptic and question things. Use DuckDuckGo, follow independent journalists on social media, read their Substack stuff, and just ask questions, because
if you are a parent or aspire to be a parent, I think that also incorporating some amount of hands-on visceral learning would be important too, whether it be like having a tangible book to read and not just off the screen, since kids, I mean, people in general are always going to have screen exposure in a high amounts going forward, but also out in nature, also in groups. Also, even when I was younger, my dad and I built like scale models, and we would like, you see a product. It's very, I think that kids like that. And it makes it more sensory because we can see, we can touch, we can feel. And that has been proven a million times that there are more neurons and more like memory areas of the brain that get activated when you have more sensory mechanisms being involved. So I think that would also help too.
For sure.
So it's not just like sitting there like staring at your teacher, like listening to them like speak at you.
Question the food pyramid, if that's still around.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I haven't been to a young school or elementary middle school in so long. I went back to Xavier when I was still in college, but I haven't been there in a really long time either.
What did you do at Xavier?
I think I just went to go get like a recommendation letter or something like that. Or I picked up my brother when he was in high school, but I haven't been on like a campus in a really long time. Not a college campus, at least.
I would love to one day help.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been a little long, so I want to end on one quote from Socrates that we both found. But this is very short, and I think encapsulates a lot of what we talked about today. And it's ancient. This is pure history right here. Socrates always said this in so many writings: "I know that I know nothing." And I think that is huge, because even if we think, I figured out the system, I figured out the best way to do this, don't just keep it at that, because how long would it be stuck there? How about revisit it sometimes? Go, okay, I could do this better. This could be better. Or on a grand scale, even our government could be doing that.
What I like about that
I know that I know nothing. Like, it's humbling. Yeah. You get grounded. You start to see an external view of what it is that you did in the past. And I think that it can lay the groundwork for having it be better, and whatever that means is. Well
said. Yeah, I love that it humbles you and it makes you feel like we're all just idiots at the end of the day. No, I'm serious.
We're just baffling
what
monkeys.
What I mean is that we think that we are the center of the universe. We think that the world revolves around us.
We're so entitled.
And it doesn't. And we all are victims of that mindset popping up in our head, no matter how self-aware we are. We do get into that loop. And I love that quote, because it is kind of this, you're humbling yourself and you're surrendering yourself to almost like a higher being or the universe or whatever that entity is for you. And I think that is good, because we can't play God, or
we can't play God.
You know,
we're not God.
We're not.
And I also think there's a satirical element to that quote too. Like, I know that I know nothing. Like, it is kind of like sarcastic in a way. But when you say I know nothing, I mean, we all know a lot. We're human beings. Like, our brains are so capable. We're so smart. We know so many things. But the problem is we almost have like so much knowledge. We have so many things we're supposed to be focused on, that it's like, I don't know, maybe we just have a hard time actually visualizing our own selves and understanding what
for sure
we have up there. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe the video. Follow us on social media. My Twitter is Ella McFarland.
Mine's _ Jordan Craft.
Or actually, mine is.
We'll
Ella
have links in the description of this video. And other links too. Check them out.
Yeah.
More to come. We have some exciting announcements coming soon, so stay tuned for that.
We have new entries on the website if you want to check out our written pieces, or if you want to submit anything. That's all on the website.
Yeah, and we are working on getting a mailing list out at some point too, which could make the community aspect a lot more intimate with everyone, and submitting your thoughts, feedback. We love feedback. Please comment if you thought of anything new from this.
Any suggestions, any conversations you want to have. Yeah.
Any food for thought that you think we would enjoy. We love that too.
Yep.
And as we do with a lot of our previous like episode topics, it's always recurring. And I think that this, although we never really phrased it in this way before, this is now the official episode that like we will for sure be revisiting this a lot.
We will be referencing these words a lot, just very similar to like our skepticism episode that we did over a year ago now. Yeah. So
just make sure to critically think. All right. Thanks, guys.